I Believe. That's the first release from Kid Creole and the Coconuts' newest album, I Wake Up Screaming. With me is August Darnell. He's the leader. He's the kid himself, Kid Creole, from Kid Creole and the Coconuts. Before we get to this album, August, I have to ask, you did find your way into the American mainstream, as we talked about this last segment, in the 1986 film Against All Odds, with your performance of Male Curiosity.
Yes.
But it had to have been fun getting into that first movie.
Yeah, that was fantastic, actually. Once again, a question of luck. Taylor Hackford, the director of that film, happened to be a Kid Creole fan and wanted us involved in the movie in some shape or form. In the beginning, I think it was just to add a song to the soundtrack, and then he decided to put us in the nightclub scene. And I have to admit, being out to Hollywood in the early Savannah Band days, we grew to love the place because it was so ridiculous. And it was nice to go back out there working. California is the kind of place you got to be working, otherwise it doesn't work for me. But going out there, meeting Taylor Hackford and James Woods, who was in the movie, it was a great experience. It was a great experience. And the song Male Curiosity, which was written just for that movie, we almost thought that was going to be the one for us in America, but they decided to use Phil Collins' song, which is a great song, Against All Odds, as a single to promote the album, and the album to promote the movie, etc., etc. So he had a big hit with that one, but we never got around to releasing Male Curiosity as a single. But it did the business for us because so many people saw the movie, and then it went on cable, and more people saw the movie. And it was also on the soundtrack, which sold very well. So that became one of our big successes in America with Male Curiosity.
The video did get some airplay. I remember seeing it on USA's Night Flight.
Yes.
Now,
yeah, and they played it occasionally on MTV. MTV, I must point out, they were not an ally for Kid Creole and the Coconuts in the early days. And if you think about MTV and think about how MTV is all about the theatrics of videos and how theatrical our band was, you would have thought that would have been a very perfect marriage, MTV and Kid Creole and the Coconuts. They never took to us, and that was frustrating as an American because I would watch MTV and I would see all the crap that was on there, and then I would just wonder why can't we get our videos shown on MTV, and they just didn't, they never took to us. And I think that hurt us enormously because MTV was very powerful in those days when it first got started, and they were not an ally. So, but what I should point out, when we went to Europe, the MTV equivalent over there, they just loved us and played us all the time. So you figure it out. It's just one of those mysteries of life.
I can't anymore. I'll need a few shots of vodka before I even try.
Thank you.
And for all the kids out there, I'm not recommending drinking before doing your homework.
Thank you.
And when it comes to drinking, if you're going to do that at a younger age, drink orange juice. That's a message.
Yes, and pay the consequences.
That's a public service message from Revenge of the 80s Radio and Kid Creole.
Amen.
August, I have to say you did find some of that commercial success with The Sex of It in 1990.
Yes, indeed. Once again, we scored because Prince had written this song for us. And it turned out to be a very, very powerful track for us. So once again, the Americans grabbed the whole of a little bit of Kid Creole. Endicott was also played extensively on the American radio. So that got us. There was a video station in those days called DET, and they played a lot of ethnic music over there. And they were very fond of Endicott, and so Endicott became like an underground hit. Also in America. But The Sex of It did very well for us, and that connection between Prince and Kid Creole was an inevitable one, because he also is a pathfinder, of course, and has done some extraordinary work in terms of opening up the field of music so that people realize that it doesn't have to be as predictable as the record companies would like it to be. So that was a good union and a good result with the Sex of It. We used to do it live as well. It was a great live.
August, the new album is called I Wake Up Screaming. It could be the title of a book about my life, but tell us about the album.
I just love that title, I Wake Up Screaming, because it suggests so many different images in different people's minds. The whole concept of a wake up screaming, meaning that there's something gone awry in your life and that you want to fix it. I love that image, but I also love the image of the person who cares enough to screaming, because there are some people who suffer silently, of course. And the title came to me because as I was working on the album, it was the time of the Arab uprising, they call the Arab Spring over here, and also there was the storms, the hurricanes, there were these huge forest fires, the tsunami, everything seemed to be pointing to the end of the world, which was predicted by Nostradamus, I believe, around that time. So I decided, I said, you know what, this is a great title because it suggests that the world is topsy-turvy. There was the whole financial crash also that was going on. So I said, originally I was going to call the album How Green Does Your Garden Grow? And then I said, no, I'm going to call it I Wake Up Screaming. And then I remembered, when I came up with that title, I remembered there was a movie that I was quite fond of when I was a youngster, a film noir, called I Wake Up Screaming. So thanks to the World Wide Web, I Googled it, and up comes I Wake Up Screaming, a 1940s movie with Victor Mature, one of my favorite actors, and Betty Grable. And I remember loving that movie when I first saw it. So I said, for two reasons, I'm going to call the album I Wake Up Screaming, because the title is just perfect for what's being said, and also as a tribute to the influence of cinema in my life.
The tracks still have something of a classic Kid Creole flavor to it, but obviously a bit more modernized. Talk about some of your favorites.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because I think that's exactly what we were going for. We did not want to abandon the Creole stamp, the iconic sound of Kid Creole. There's a definite sound to the Kid Creole music, and that is, it's very eclectic. It's always been eclectic. We call it mulatto music or mongrel music or rainbow music. It has a number of titles. But the fact is we borrow extensively from every genre known to mankind. And I didn't want to change that. I wanted it to be a hodgepodge, a potpourri of reggae and pop and jazz and country and western and funk, R&B, everything thrown into the pot and mixed up. So it does still have that, thank goodness, but it also has a very, very accessible modern sound. And I think the reason that it succeeds in that area is because the songwriting is still myself, but I collaborated with a gentleman by the name of Andrew Butler, who also has his own fame with a band called Hercules Love Affair. And he's the one who made sure that some of the new songs sounded very 80s, but at the same time with the production of 2011. And also thanks to my sons, who live in England, and they're now musicians, and they have their own band, a band called Picture Book, and they helped engineer and produce the album with me. So it was the first project that my sons are actually co-producing with me. And because they're young, they're in their 20s, they have their finger on the pulse of today. So the sound of the album, I'm very happy to say, is very contemporary, but it still has that old Kid Creole flavor. My favorites on the album, I love how I Wake Up Screaming in the Tropics came out, because that obviously is the title track. And it's a funny song, and it's got the old Kid Creole flavor, and it's a calypso and a soca, which I'm very fond of. I had my biggest success with a soca called Annie, I'm Not Your Daddy, of course. And this is like the follow-up of that. It's a story of a guy who takes a girl on vacation in the Caribbean, and she doesn't want to get involved in what he wants to get involved in. So it's a good title for the song, because he does wake up screaming because he can't get her to be romantic when he wants her to be romantic. So the song I Wake Up Screaming in the Tropics is my favorite on the album, followed by Verily, 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 which also has a nice love song, but with a nice jungle feel to it. Once again, playing on the influence of the tropics, again, in Verily, Verily, Verily. Those are my two favorites. And I have a ballad on the album called Tudor Jones, which I'm quite proud of, because I don't write many ballads, but this one I think is my finest ballad to date. And it took us a long time. This is one of those songs that I said did not come easily. It took a long time to write it. It took a long time to write the lyrics. It took a long time in the production, but I'm quite proud of the result.
One of the tracks that really stuck out to me was something that seems sort of experimental and very different from most anything I've heard from Kid Creole and the Coconuts, or even Dr. Buzzard. Long Live the King.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. that was one of my quirky moments. Because every Kid Creole album has a quirky moment. I think on the first album, Off the Coast of Me was the quirky one, and I still love Off the Coast of Me. But on this one, Long Live the King, I don't know how the concept came about. I was just messing around in my house in Sweden, and the chords came first and the melody came first. And then I was watching CNN, and on CNN there was, as I said before, there was this talk of all these dictators who were falling, who were losing their kingdoms because they had been so ridiculous in their power struggles, and how they had destroyed their homeland, but they had made themselves very rich, and how they had no concern for the population of their domains. And I said to myself, wow, is every king, is every leader turns out to be corrupted by power? And that's how I wrote the song, by thinking about kings and saying, well, wait a minute, there has to be some king somewhere in history who was a good king. And so I came up with Long Live the King.
August Darnell is my guest on Revenge of the 80s Radio. You might remember him as Kid Creole, leader of Kid Creole and the Coconuts. We're talking about his new album, I Wake Up Screaming. August, I understand you are branching out these days and working on some musicals.
Yes, indeed. That's a natural next step for me. We've been working on writing a musical for Broadway and the West End in England now for 5 years, and I'm glad to say that we finally done the big step towards getting it produced. And now I would say that in 2012 we're going to succeed in having one of the two musicals mounted. I'm working on two at the moment. One is called Ivy League, and it's a murder mystery, and the other one is called, quite aptly, I'm a Wonderful Thing, Baby. And the I'm a Wonderful Thing, Baby is more like the Mamma Mia musical. It's the canon of Kid Creole music, with a flimsy storyline holding it together. The Ivy League is a brand new concept, and my partner on that is Peter Schott, who co-wrote I'm a Wonderful Thing with me, and a number of other Kid Creole songs. And also we have, as I said before, we have the opportunity of presenting this in 2012. So I'm quite excited about that. And for me, that's what the future is. The future is theater and cinema. Because, after a while, you've got the T-shirt for every concert you can ever imagine in the rock and roll world. I've done it. I've done just about every country in the world and played extensively, and have done so many studio albums that I think it's inevitable that the next step would be something in the theatrical world, but not necessarily a pop album anymore.
And you're also working on I'm a Wonderful Thing with Vivian Goldman.
Yes, indeed. Vivian Goldman and I go back all the way to the glorious beginning of the 1980s. She was one of the first journalists to interview me in London, and we became friends, and we stayed friends all these years. And just 5 years ago, we got together and said, hey, you know what, it's time that we write a musical together. Because I've always admired her work, her writings. She's done the Bob Marley books and a number of things. She's actually lecturing now in New York City, teaching music at one of the universities. So we got together and we said, let's write a musical with the canon, with the Kid Creole canon, the music of Kid Creole that the fans know. And this became I'm a Wonderful Thing. It was originally called Cherchez la Femme, but then we figured there were a lot of people who wouldn't know what Cherchez la Femme meant, so we turned it into I'm a Wonderful Thing. And we hope, fingers crossed, I don't want to jinx it, but we hope to have it mounted in 2012 in London.
Well, good luck with that, August.
Thank you so much. That's a dream for me, a dream come true.
And fans of Kid Creole and the Coconuts can also check out Adriana Kege's DVD documentary called Kid Creole and My Coconuts. You can find information about the movie, screenings, press, and everything else on the website for that, kidcreoleandmycoconuts.com. August Darnell, thank you for coming on Revenge of the 80s Radio with me.
Thank you, man. It's been great talking to you. And it's also, I must say this, it's also such a pleasure to speak to someone who has the knowledge, who knows what they're talking about. Trust me when I tell you, because I do a lot of interviews, but it's always a pleasure to talk to someone who has the knowledge, has been in the scene, so to speak, and knows what they're talking about. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I'm going to use that for my promo now.
Amen.
And your website, August, is kidcreole.com.
Yeah, actually, there are two websites. One is kidcreole.com and one is kidcreoleandthecoconuts.com.
Let's play another track from your new album, I Wake Up Screaming. This is one of your favorites, Verily, 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 on Revenge of the 80s Radio.